The Treaty of Paris, 1783, a story of patriots, princes, and the birth of a nation. The ink had not yet dried on the map lying across the polished mahogany table in a quiet room in Paris. Three American diplomats, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay, leaned over it like weary travelers who had finally reached the end of a long and punishing journey. Outside, Paris was alive with the usual chatter, horse carriages clattering over cobblestones, merchants shouting prices, and the faint music drifting from wine houses. But inside the negotiation chambers, the world seemed frozen. Every word spoken here would shape the future of a continent. The war that wouldn't end. For 8 long years, the American colonies had fought the British Empire, a giant with a navy that ruled the seas and an army feared across the world. But the colonies fought with something Britain underestimated: raw, stubborn determination. By 1781, after the surrender of Lord Cornwallis at Yorktown, the Americans believed victory was within reach. But Britain, bruised, not broken, refused to accept defeat without one last struggle. The war lingered. And the people waited. Farmers returned to fields that had been battlegrounds. Widows prayed for peace. Soldiers wondered if they would ever go home. The men who carried a nation on their shoulders. Benjamin Franklin, dressed in plain brown cloth that made him stand out among European aristocrats, had become something of a celebrity in France. But fame was not his mission. Adams was fiery, precise, and impatient, a man who spoke like gunpowder, quickly and with force. Jay was sharp, diplomatic, and cautious, the sort of man who could detect a lie hidden inside a whisper. Together, they represented the hopes of millions. Across the table, the British Lion. Representing Britain was Richard Oswald, a quiet, thoughtful negotiator whose task was as heavy as theirs. He knew the winds of change had blown across the Atlantic. Britain had lost men, money, ships, and the American spirit would not bend. Yet surrendering an entire continent was no simple matter. The tension. Before peace days stretched into weeks, words became weapons. Arguments on borders, fishing rights, stolen property, and prisoners of war. "You ask for too much," Oswald would say. "We ask only for what any free nation deserves," Franklin would reply calmly. Sometimes voices rose, sometimes silence said more than speeches. But slowly, painfully, the outline of a new world began to emerge. September 3rd, 1783. The moment history held its breath. The day was warm. Sunlight fell across the table where the final document lay. The Treaty of Paris. Adams read it twice. Jay traced the edges of the paper as if feeling the borders of the new nation. Franklin removed his spectacles, wiped them, and smiled. A small, tired smile. Oswald hesitated but finally took the quill. With one stroke of ink, he acknowledged the impossible. The United States of America was now a free, independent nation. The room was silent. No cheering crowds, no triumphant music, just the quiet sound of history changing its course. What the treaty meant. The treaty granted recognition of American independence, a massive expansion of American territory, from the Atlantic to the Mississippi, shared fishing rights off Newfoundland, the withdrawal of British troops, the opening of a new chapter for a young nation. For Britain, it was an ending. For America, it was a beginning. Epilogue. The weight of a signature. When Franklin walked out of the building into the Paris sunlight, a group of French children waved at him. Not knowing what else to do, he tipped his hat. He thought of the farmers in Virginia, the shopkeepers in Boston, the soldiers shivering at Valley Forge. He thought of how a handful of restless colonies had become something greater, a nation built on an idea, that people could govern themselves. The Treaty of Paris was more than ink on parchment. It was a turning point, a promise, a fragile flame that would grow into the American story.